On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
Today's episode of the podcast is going to be another group episode. I'll have the guys introduce themselves and then we'll get going. So we'll go Travis first, Ben second, Logan third. Just name where you're at and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts.
Travis Roberson. I'm in the Columbus, Ohio area. Currently at a high school in the Columbus area and also just started my own private training business.
Ben Loftis. I'm currently in the Northwest Arkansas area. In the process of starting my own sports performance private training company.
Logan Byman, currently in Frisco, Texas, and working with Exos, their Frisco location.
Guys, so the reason that I wanted to have this episode, we were talking a little bit before this, is just you all have the professional baseball experience. You put the hours in, you put the grind in, so to speak. And now you all have moved on from it and you're all kind of doing your own private setting business type of deal. And so I really wanted to just talk to you guys about that and kind of show that there is a life after pro ball if people want it. And maybe it might even be more appropriate for people. So let's get into that. You guys all kind of briefly touched on your current positions, but kind of tell me where you're at now, what led you to that spot, like why you chose where you chose, and we'll get into all the training and things like that after.
I guess I'll go first. So I, over the summer, I had my first kid and he was like 2 weeks old and we had to go on like a 14-day road trip and it sucked. Like everybody obviously talks about like, when you have a kid, it kind of changes you. I didn't believe it, but it kind of does. And like you'd mentioned, like the season of minor league just kind of grinds on you a little bit and was ready to be home and kind of take that sacrifice for my family for once and stuff. And we had just moved to the Columbus area. So I kind of was reaching out to some people I know and I actually got connected to Nationwide Children's Hospital because down in Columbus, a lot of the high schools get contracted through the hospitals. So currently the head strength coach at a big Division I high school just outside of Columbus, but my schedule allows me to be a little more freedom. So I decided to open my own private training business. So it kind of gives me the more freedom to keep doing the baseball thing and specialize in that in this private training, but also like I was in college, kind of train multiple sports and just get a variety of training in. So that's been nice to have multiple sports to train once again.
Yeah, so similar but different to Travis. My this last season, after we had the COVID year where you worked minimally and didn't have like a full minor league season, going back to affiliate ball just kind of woke me up to I'm kind of moving on to the next season of life too, and realizing I'm going to be a husband and I can't just have the opportunities to witness everything that goes on in one place. Is kind of tired of living on the road consistently. So actually in about June I got a phone call from a friend in Northwest, and I worked at the university there, and he was talking about he wanted to open up a private training facility, sports performance facility. And I was like, I thought that this was an awesome idea back when I worked at the university. I'd love to be able to come back and do that. So the opportunity kind of presented itself as, hey, maybe we could do this. And as the summer went on, it seemed like a more viable option. And things are going well with the girlfriend, and now she's the fiance, in a more consistent spot, not living on the road, starting marriage off out of a suitcase. And also just, there's a huge baseball population here already. I had a few connections with previously being in the state. And then also, there's the other aspect of kind of what Travis touched on of other sports, being able to be well-versed and have the opportunity to work with multiple athletes in different capacities.
Yeah. For myself, I think just timing wise, things happened to work out. I had interned with Exos back in 2014 in Carlsbad, California. Um, Worked under some really good coaches there and had stayed in touch with them just throughout my career, used them as mentors and sounding boards and stuff like that. And was looking to, continue to move up. Just the scenario where things were, there wasn't really space to go. And there ended up being an opportunity that opened up with Exos. So obviously outside of baseball, and it seemed like the right time. It was the right deal. And just ended up being a good scenario to be able to kind of change things up a little bit, shift focus a little bit more, be able to work with a lot of a wider variety of athletes in a little bit of a different scenario. So just ended up being the right offer at the right time, I think, for me.
So you all kind of touched on like expanding and working with other athletes other than just baseball players. So like, how does the training that you're doing with your athletes now that you have that full autonomy and the programming freedom for yourselves, like how does that differ now compared to when you were specifically in season with professional baseball players at a minor league affiliate?
Mine's probably a little bit different. Working within Exos, it's a little similar, I guess, to kind of how the minor league rolls, where you have a main hub. The main hub of Exos would be in Phoenix, and then you have 3 other Performance Institute locations outside of that, and they all run reasonably similarly to each other as far as programming. So if an athlete went from one location to another location for whatever reason, it wouldn't be a drastic change. Just like if you went from AA to AAA, you don't want that athlete to have to deal with a massively different program. So we run within a certain bandwidth of programming that we all stay within in order to have some sort of continuity throughout the program. And then, athletes that are, for example, in our combine program in Phoenix get a similar experience to the ones that are in Frisco.
For me, it's a little bit different than pro ball. In pro ball, you kind of have guidelines, that your minor league coordinator kind of sets out and you individually program, but you still kind of have that template guidelines. Where I'm at now, the high school, I kind of have total freedom to program however I want and stuff. And obviously having athletes in off season and preseason, it's a little bit different than just having athletes mostly in season in person. So it's been nice to get back to that. And it's also been a little challenging just because sometimes I'll have 70 to 80 athletes on the floor at once, all by myself. So the programming's got to get a little creative from that standpoint, and just obviously different challenges. But in pro ball, it is similar in the fact of like, you just got to be able to deal with things on the fly because things are going to happen. And when you're dealing with high school kids, even more things happen that I've come to find out. So.
Yeah, I've experienced a good amount of similarity and difference within being in my own private sector now. Similar in that right now I'm only working with about 15 athletes. A lot of the time, it allows me to be pretty individualized with what's going on. But at the same time, I'm working a lot with high school kids now, and their training age is lower, and they need similar things. So if there is any in programming, I got to be creative with equipment and make sure that we're not doubling up on things that are being used. But I think the biggest difference from baseball shifting to more like continuous team sports or field sports that have more interaction has actually been kind of the agility component, prioritizing reactivity in a different way than baseball. Baseball is a lot of timing reactivity, but spatial awareness, spatial reactivity in the context of like a field sport like soccer or football or even on a basketball court, that's something that I'm learning to be a little bit more forward in programming with. But also, I think that, coming from pro baseball, every place that we came from had a pretty solid training philosophy, working with professional athletes and professional coaches that are very seasoned. So a lot of the same basics that, we're hitting, hinge, squat, push, pull, those types of things remain consistent. And honestly, like, high school kids just get better. If you are consistent with your training, you can do, 6 sets of 3 on a front squat. If they never front squatted before, you can do that for 8 weeks and they'll keep getting better as long as you are coaching them well, starting light, not letting them have bad reps. They'll progress and they'll continue to get better as their, intermuscular coordination improves. So it's been like, in some regards, it's been good to get back to like the very basics of simple movement training. But it's also been good to be pushed in areas and avenues of exploring, spatial awareness, reactivity, components like that.
Travis, do you find it like you have 70 to 80 athletes at one time? I'm super curious because obviously we probably don't see that ever in the pro ball setting. Like, how are you managing that? Like, are you like having to water down your program for kids? Are you having to like put them on tempos? Like, how are you controlling 70 to 80 high school kids?
Yeah, so I've only been there since October, so I've kind of played around with it. Luckily, some of the sports will have at least one coach at their lifting session. So obviously I can't trust that coach 100%, but if somebody needs spotted or like regurgitate a message, but like I've really had to dumb things down for the most part now that I have 16 total teams coming in. Like men's and women's swimming will come in together. So like they'll have their own side of the weight room, but like I tell them all the time, like, I'm training to be athletes, like just so that they don't see like a women's tennis player see the same exercise that the football players and think like I'm training just like a football player when it's just a half kneeling lift or a power off press or something like that. So it's pretty basic for the most part right now, just to get a feel for where the kids are at, because they've had a lot of turnover where I've been strength coach wise. So like for the first 30 weeks, I just let them run their old program just to kind of take notes and see where each team was physically and like how much they knew and stuff like that. So like some teams have taken more steps back, but some teams I've been able to just kind of roll with and stuff, like our men's basketball team and stuff, like they had a pretty good foundation. So I was able to get a little more creative with them and stuff. So it's just scheduling has been a little bit of a nightmare, but just trying to get creative with certain teams of where I put them and stuff so I can give a little more individual. But like teams don't start till 2:45 after school, and my last team ends at 6. So like I'll have 7 teams on a Tuesday. So I'm just flying around like a maniac. I feel like I'm back in college sometimes, of just bouncing back and racking up about 15,000 steps a day.
And then as soon as you go home, you got the baby to deal with too, huh?
100%.
So you guys talk about like working with younger kids, high school kid, like the thing for me that I've always been intrigued about is like I see other people talking about how they train high school kids, and like parents want like sport specific programs for those kids. Like, how do you navigate the waters of like having a high school kid who claims to be like, I'm a baseball player, but really they're multi-sport athletes? And then as Travis alluded to, like the swim team doesn't want to be labeled as like football lifters, even though like a lot of those movements kind of carry over. So like, how do you deal with multi-sport athletes in the private setting that are like high school kids? Like, do you have specific programs for baseball only? Do you just kind of create general athleticism? Like, how are you guys navigating those waters?
For us, I guess there's a couple answers to the question. Initially, if we have a group that is big enough, like if you had 20 high school baseball players that came in, we would probably have a specific program just for them, and then have a separate group that was the remainder of our high school athletes that were multi-sported. If you have less than that, then we may have, one of those mixed groups that are in a lot of sports, or an athlete that is playing multiple sports. To me, when I talk to the athletes about it, it's a little bit about the sport, obviously, but at the high school level, a lot of it is development. So I try to talk to them about, what the goal of the exercises are, what we're trying to develop. And then you can even speak to them, within some sports terms as well, where, we all know rotational power is valuable in baseball, but that doesn't make it not valuable in other sports either. So, just showing the parallels of, yes, this guy is a DN and you're a pitcher, but you guys have some needs that are the same. So this is why you're doing this exercise. Now, when I explain it to him, I'm going to explain it differently. It doesn't mean that you need a different exercise. It's just the same exercise accomplishing two different goals for two different people. So I think a lot of it is that explanation, and then, individualizing things within the program, so we'll have two kids running a similar program if they're on the same phase, but their mobility might look different, right? Their correctives might be a little bit different. Even their exercise selections might be slightly different. And that gives them, one, you're doing what they need, which is valuable for them. But I think it also gives them that feel of like, oh, mine's a little bit different because, they're taking the time to individualize for me and all that stuff.
Yeah, there's that piece of being able to sell what you're selling in a way that is wrapped well and received well by the athlete. Actually, when I was with the Padres, we had a Navy SEAL come in and talk to us about what makes them successful. And it's always interesting because Navy SEALs ask pro athletes what success is, and then pro athletes like hold Navy SEALs on a pedestal about what excellence is. And it's like, they're just it's kind of silly. But one thing this guy said that really stood out to me, he was like, it's really cool in the movies, like when they rappel through a window and kick out the glass and shoot everybody, but you're not very accurate in real life when you do that. It doesn't work very well. It's a lot easier if you just kick down the front door and shoot them straight in the face. And he's like, we're more brilliant at the basics than everybody else in the world. And I think when you establish, like, you need to be brilliant at the basics with high school athletes, especially when you put them through some movement screens, and not necessarily movement screens, but you just put them through some mobility work and they feel like they're failing with just their body weight, that starts to humble them real quick and go, oh, maybe I do need to, I don't need to do this really fancy rear foot elevated, contralaterally loaded, oscillatory, eyes closed squat. Maybe I just need to work on hinging, and being able to kind of humble them in a way that's done lovingly, that can relate back verbally to performance in their sport. It starts to make things a little more simple. And I even tell parents, I'm like, when you're a professional athlete, it's probably like 70% like general work and 30% individualized mobility or tempo changes or positioning changes. But when you're a high school kid, it's more like 90-10, 85-15. And yeah, it shows up in their mobility work, or it shows up in just changing the rep scheme. It shows up in simple ways to where, I don't ever want to sacrifice our excellence. I don't ever want to sacrifice us being brilliant at the basics. And I think that also carries over to how they view their performance, how they view their life, crushing fundamentals, not just in the weight room or just in sport, but in how you treat other people, what kind of a person you are, those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think they both touched on it, like communication, just being able to communicate with the athlete or the parent or even the coach of these are the basics, but be able to communicate how one lift is going to help them in each sport. You know what I mean? Like if I talk to swimming about a certain lift, then I talk to a baseball player about that same lift, just being able to figure out how it's going to help them in their individual sport and how that communication is going to help with that. And especially in the high school realm, I've kind of touched on it, a lot of my athletes are doing the same stuff, but just being able to communicate to each one on how that's going to help their individual sport. But then even in the high school realm, you touched on it, the multi-sport athletes of across the board, these three teams are doing this exact thing. They're all squatting, they're all hinging, they're all pulling, they're all pushing. You're just wrapped up in baseball. So we're just doing a couple things that are specific. And then on the private realm, I mean, it just kind of depends on the individual, of where they're at in their development. My college guys are a lot different than the youth guys that I have, but just be able to communicate it to the parents and the athlete of just getting some more buy-in. I mean, we've all done it in pro ball. You have the two guys, they're on the same lift, but the guy's like, why am I doing close to his lift? You know what I mean? Just be able to sell him on, this is why you need to be in the weight room and doing your lift and how it's individual to them.
Do you guys think having the pro ball, previous job experience has helped you or hurt you? And let me give you an example. I did my first year in pro ball with the Pirates, I was in rookie ball, and then I worked at a private facility in the offseason, private baseball facility. And it seemed like so many people wanted to train with me just because I had the Pirates name, despite the fact that I was in rookie ball in Bristol, Tennessee. You know what I mean? I was like the furthest away from the big leagues you could ever get. But people are like, oh, this guy worked with pro athletes, so he must know what he's talking about. Do you guys feel that that's helped you in business, or are people labeling you as like, oh, you're a baseball guy, so you don't know anything about training football or swimming or soccer, like, or both, honestly? Like, how has that helped or hurt you in your private setting situation now?
I think that it's only helped me. I mean, I think that there's some capacities maybe of assumption that's maybe hurt me in educating parents initially. You know, I think when you've been with an organization for some years and you've worked with those athletes for a long time, their buy-ins there, you already kind of speak the same training and performance language. So there's some assumption that happens that kind of helps you get through the day. But I think I took for granted the knowledge base that my athletes had when I was in pro ball versus the knowledge base that parents have about training. But at the same time, what I'll say is that I think my experience in pro ball with that has also helped me, because learning to communicate with people from different cultures, language barriers, all of that has made me a better listener, more patient, more understanding, and a better communicator by far, which has given me a lot more patience in communicating with parents and educating them on why what I'm doing is valuable and why it might look different than what other people in the area are doing, but is still a very prestigious product. I think that the communication skills have been the biggest gain from being in pro ball in the traversing back to the private sector.
Trav, Logan, thoughts?
I feel like it hasn't hurt me, at least, especially at the high school, because luckily for me, I was at a college for 6 years where I coached over 10 sports before I got in the pro ball. So that helped me a little bit. But in the private training, I would say when I'm trying to get other clients that aren't playing baseball, it's hurt me a little bit because I get perceived as a baseball only guy. And it's just trying to communicate that like I know how to train other athletes and stuff. But I mean, Ben said it good that like it's definitely helped me become a better communicator, especially when I have like younger athletes and stuff that have never really trained before and stuff, and be able to communicate and break down things a little more individually. You know, like in pro ball, you got to be able to break things down and tell them exactly how it's going to help them become a better baseball player. So I would definitely say in that sense, it's helped me for sure.
Yeah, I think there's far more benefits than there are detriments. I think with any job that you do, people like to have a box to put things in so that they understand them. So you're always going to get, if you just came out of working in the NFL for 6 years, you're going to be a football guy, and baseball guys are going to be like, well, I don't know. If you come out of the MLB, you're going to be a baseball. So, you're always going to get a little bit of that. I think that, it is one of those jobs that teaches you, working under great staffs and working with other great coaches, obviously, helps your development. And then I think you get the added bonuses of understanding how to make programs and training function across like a wide array of locations, which I don't think a lot of people get that experience. I think dealing with people from different cultures, people that speak different language, like Ben was mentioning, is hugely valuable, because that doesn't throw you off if that happens later on, and you're acutely used to that when you work in pro ball, because it happens. I mean, it's over 50% of the time, it seems like. So, there's a lot of advantages that you gain from that type of stuff. And I do think initially, sometimes people will try to, oh, you're a baseball guy kind of deal. But what I've found is, if you can have a conversation with them, I think usually people realize very quickly that, if you can articulate yourself and you can discuss why you would do the things that you would do with those athletes and how that's going to help them, whereas you may train a baseball player differently, and you explain that, people tend to see past the, recent job experience piece pretty quickly.
Yeah, I've said it so many times on this podcast. Like, I really think professional baseball, like, really makes you a great strength coach. Again, not even just programming wise, just all the things that we have to go through with the travel, the schedule, the weather, the food, the mental side of the game. And then, like you guys said, dealing like with other countries and language barriers, and then communicating with coaches on a daily basis and being away from our family. Like, all those factors make you a great strength coach. And you all alluded to, like, if you can just communicate that in the private setting, like, it really doesn't matter who you're working with, because you're going to figure out a way to give them the best training. And I've never worked with basketball. I don't know the game of basketball, but I can tell you, if I work at a facility that has basketball, I'm going to do everything I can to learn about the game of basketball. I just feel like that's part of, like, the pro ball. Like, that's just how it is for everybody in pro ball. Like, we just figure out how to make situations work. And so I was just curious if it had hurt you or helped you guys. And I kind of figured at first some people might shy away, but once you communicate your goals and the programming, things like that, like, people are going to swarm to you. So what does your daily schedule look like now compared to your time in pro ball? Everybody knows the daily schedule in pro ball is kind of chaotic and long, and we do it every single day. Like, do you guys have days off? Like, what does the schedule look like for you comparatively?
So ours is, it has some baseball similarities, I guess, where we have groups most of the day that are running. Now, when spring training is your absolute fiasco when you're in pro ball, right? The NFL Combine is basically that for us. When we get a ton of those guys that come through, which is what we're in right now, things heat up pretty quick, because we've got 4 combine groups that are training twice a day. So on top of that, you have your normal athlete load. We have baseball off season, we have NFL off season, we have military, we have adults, we have NFLPA, we have high school. So, I mean, there's a lot of people coming through right now. So January, February are very busy. Once you get through that, it's a little more standard for the rest of the year, where we have our typical groups, and you have more of your ebb and flow of your in-season athletes that are free agents, your out-of-season athletes. It just rotates what sport it is that's rolling through. And then you're pretty much set and standard with your high school athletes, your NFLPA athletes, and stuff, like your military athletes. But schedule-wise, it's, we usually, first group starts running around 8:00. In combine, I'm usually out around 6-ish, something like that. Outside of combine, it's first group is 8 or 9, and then you're out of there by maybe 4 or something like that. So it's a little bit lighter. In combine, we do run some sessions on Saturday, so we do go 5.5 days a week, I guess you'd call it. And then outside of combine, it's normal 5-day-a-week deal. And then Exos runs a regen day on Wednesdays. So Wednesdays tend to be a little bit lighter. We'll run a recovery session for our athletes. And the session times are a little different. Then we do a little bit later start, and you're typically out of there a little bit earlier.
I'm pretty lucky. I don't usually go until about 1:00 to the high school, and then my last group's at 6. Now sometimes I'll have clients like in the mornings, and maybe 1 in the evening. I try to limit my weekends. I mean, that was kind of the reason I got out of pro ball, because I wanted to be home a little more. So, I mean, it crams my schedule really hard, like during those hours, but usually I'm only there from like 1 to 6 and maybe a couple clients in the morning right now. I mean, once baseball season starts, it's a little dead more, or it's a little slower on the private training side, but that's about it right now.
Yeah, the uniqueness of starting my own business has been that there's a similarity to pro ball of, you feel like you're kind of always on the clock, like as long as your phone's on, something's going on. But at the same time, I also have the ability and the power to say no when I want to, or say that I'm just going to shut my phone off, or I'm not going to reply to this right now. So similarly, like I have early morning before school and then a session or two, and then after school until about 7 p.m. Pretty fluid with kids coming in and out consistently. But so I have kind of that midday lull, but that midday lull right now has been another part-time job, and then also working to get this business off the ground. So similarly to Exos, like we're going to have our busy season with high school kids once school's out this summer. And in school, there's that kind of consistent flow of, football kids are in off season right now. So there's more kids coming in. But then that'll change, once fall starts. But I have a good mix of kids that are in different sports. So I feel like during the school year, that'll be a pretty consistent number, but that number will definitely spike once the summer rolls around. So there's that kind of that extra pressure of being a business owner and having to deal with the financial side of things and how things are going to work on that end to get things going and get things open. But at the same time, there is that other added freedom of kind of like I need to communicate with parents. I need to communicate with sports coaches to an extent, but I kind of am my own front office. I'm kind of my own administrator, so I get to prioritize what I think is important on kind of the logistical side of things, and some other X's and O's that aren't always fun. But yeah, it's been like a good mix, a little bit more stress, but like a good kind of stress transitioning out.
So elaborating on that a little bit is like personal life for you guys as a whole, like have things been improved? Trav, you talk about like, spending more time with your family and your newborn. Like, do you guys feel that the balance that you have in your life is better than it was in pro ball? And are you enjoying that balance as much as you thought you would if you are getting it?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice not having to be by my phone constantly or sending emails, like typical off season is of just hopping on Zoom calls and being on that all day has been immensely great. Obviously I have a 6-month-old, so I don't get that much relaxation time, but it's been awesome. I think once spring training starts and you guys get rolling and stuff, I think it will be even more enjoyable just because when it's in July, I can just go on the weekends and have fun with my family and stuff, something I haven't got to experience in a couple of years and stuff. And it's been nice to be able to see my extended family even more. But yeah, it's definitely been nice to just have that separation and stuff. I've even made a point of like on the weekends of just not doing any work unless it absolutely has to and stuff. And it's kind of nice. Like Ben talks about like being like the private side and your own business, like you can prioritize things the way you want it to be. Like if you don't want to do, you don't have to. So that's been nice to have that freedom and be able to say no to things.
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of added freedom on my end of being able to like go on hunting trips with my dad or be able to just commit to things that I wouldn't normally be able to commit to. Wedding season this summer, I'll actually get to be able to go to weddings instead of being in pro ball. There's little pieces of that are nice. And it's also not to say that like those are things that I dreaded, in pro ball. Like pro ball had its own set of benefits and good add-ons that were valuable. But yeah, there has been a good shift of freedom. I think that you go so hard in season in pro ball that you very much look forward to the off season to kind of rest and recharge, but it's a different kind of busy with the computer work and stuff. So you're also kind of itching to get back to spring training. But I think with kind of the shifting career that the whole year will be balanced out a little bit more in terms of workload. And that's kind of a nice mental piece of thinking about like, I'm never really going to have like a huge workload to where I need to decompress for 4 months afterwards. So that's been kind of a good mental break to have.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some benefits, like Travis, I started this in October. So I think I'd probably have to get through a full year to give like a good answer on how much different it is, for that whole year. but I forgot to mention this in the question you asked before, but working on figuring out the whole vacation days thing is interesting, because in pro ball, they just don't exist. So you don't have to worry about it, but now it's trying to figure out when to use those, when not to use those, stuff like that. So looking forward to being able to use those. I know my girlfriend and I are excited to be able to spend more time together on some weekends and stuff like that. And like Ben said, a lot of weddings coming up that I'll probably actually be able to go to, which would be awesome.
It's funny, Logan, you said the whole like vacation time, because like I have to do like the PTO hours, like to pay time off. And I was asking my wife, I'm like, well, how do I do this? She's like, what do you mean? I was like, this is the first time I've had to do paid time off in my entire life. She's like, well, welcome to adulthood. And I'm like, it's not my fault. Like, in the off season, you just one day, you take a day off, but during season, you don't get days off.
I was the same way. I've had that conversation with a bunch of people. I'm really trying to figure out what to do with it. Like, how do I use it? How much is there? What does it mean? It's a whole thing.
I can't wait for you guys to use it. And then you're going to be like, man, how are my athletes back home? Like, who's taking care of them? Like, you're going to be constantly thinking about your groups of athletes the whole time that you're taking that day off. It's funny. Like you guys say, you grind it out in pro ball, and then, you like kind of earn that off season. And then by the time the off season's done, like you're itching for spring training. Like, we're recording this now at the end of January, and I'm like super excited to get back to spring. I just booked my flight the other day, but like pretty much I've narrowed down my travel to like Thanksgiving week. Like, I know there's nothing that's going to be going on Thanksgiving, and like I probably should spend the time with my family, but like I'll see them at Christmas or whatever. Like Thanksgiving is basically going to be my travel for my wife and I moving forward. So other than that, like my phone will always be on in professional baseball. So I really do feel that for you guys, like that difference of, hey, I can put my phone to the side. I don't have any work to do today. Like that was really an underappreciated thing for me when I was in the private setting for a short amount of time. It's just different, right? Like, so kind of like what would be long-term aspiration for you guys? You've seen the pro ball grind and the lifestyle. You're kind of getting into this private setting side, your own business now. Like, where do you guys see yourselves going with this? And obviously with the caveat that you can always change your mind and go back to what you've done previously. Like, where do you see yourself right now progressing 5 years from now?
My vision for me is less sport or organization oriented. If the scenario is right, then I would want to stay where I was at. If it wasn't and there was a better scenario somewhere else, then I would want to go somewhere else. To me, it's more, can I get into some higher leadership positions where I'm able to impact more athletes and more coaches? I talked with Brent Calloway and Victor Hall and Jordan Brown at Exos when I was interviewing with them about the fact that, that was really what I wanted to do, was impact as many athletes and as many coaches as possible. So, for me, it's just moving forward in my career. How do I continue to do that? And, that really drives a lot of the decision-making, whether I'm working in the private sector or working in a professional organization or working in collegiate sports or whatever, hasn't ever really, I don't hate or love one more than the other. I think they all have their draws. It's more about the impact that I can make and whether that scenario fits at that time.
I guess for me, it would be with the high school, it would just be build as good of a culture in the weight room as I could, where kids, with the school I'm at, it's not mandatory, and getting it where it doesn't have to be mandatory, but all athletes for all teams want to come in every time we have a lifting session, to just kind of slowly build that culture where kids want to come in the weight room, they enjoy it and stuff like that. I think we're on the right path, but there's still a lot of work. And then privately, I mean, luckily, I live in Columbus. It's a big area, and there's not very much direct baseball strength and conditioning and sports performance in the Columbus area. So, I mean, I would like to grow that to be where if guys are in the area, like they want to come to me and stuff and slowly build that, because I think there's an avenue in the city for that. It's just trying to get there and stuff, where if people ask where to go, like my name pops up on that list.
Yeah, very similarly. Obviously got out of pro ball to have a little bit more freedom, move on to the next season of life. So I think my biggest aspiration is being able to be the kind of, man and friend and husband and father, all those things that I've always wanted to be, be very, very present with the people around me in the community. And then as that leads into coaching, as that leads into running a facility, being a coach, I just really want anybody that I interact with to know that like what Ben Loftis is doing is the standard of excellence in Northwest Arkansas for performance. Like that it's the gold standard. There's no question as to where you go if you want the best. And that's not just like I don't want that to be like that's what I am now. Like that's my aspiration. Like I want to continue to grow as a coach. I want to continue to, hone my craft, sharpen my skills, build deep relationships, also to where it's not just like, yeah, the performance training is good, but it's also like I want there to be like a known thing that, oh, you trained with Ben, like you must have some pretty like top-notch character. Like he really sharpened you and developed you to be a good man or a good woman. So yeah, those are kind of the two big things that I think. And even the thing that I like about that too is that no matter what trajectory happens, if another opportunity comes up to go back to pro ball or a college job opens up, like I think those are two controllable aspirations in whatever God might throw my way in the future. So
Right on. I love it. Guys, I appreciate you coming on, like sharing your thoughts with me and just kind of your path and like showing people that there are options outside of professional baseball. And on a personal level, it was just good to catch up with all you guys. I miss talking with you and being able to see and everything. So good luck with all the endeavors. I wish you guys nothing but the best. I know you guys are all going to kill it, knock it out of the park, and we'll definitely catch up soon.
Sounds
Thanks
good.
for having
Appreciate you having us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, that concludes our episode with Travis, Logan, and Ben. I hope you enjoyed this one. I thought it was a good idea to have some coaches on who have some skin in the game in professional baseball, and they've moved on and they're pursuing their own endeavors and pursuing different things, and just to kind of show that there are other things outside of professional baseball for strength coaches, and that the time in professional baseball does help you be successful in other avenues as well. 3 things that I took from the guys in this episode: use the lessons learned in previous jobs to help you in your current setting. Small individualizations will go a long way, and being able to communicate effectively will help you regardless of where you work. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.